Greetings. I'm Dr. Joy Zabala, and I'm here today to discuss an overview of the quiet indicators for including assistive technology in the IEP. I'm a member of the Quiet Leadership Team, one of the co-founders of Quiet, and I have a great passion for assistive technology, accessible educational materials, universal design for learning, and all of those things that really support my passion for the learning of all students. And of course, for students with disabilities, the IEP is the pathway that we take that makes sure that they have a high quality education. So in this area, it's important to think about that the idea requires IEP teams to consider AT needs in the development of every IEP. If AT is needed, it needs to be provided for a free, appropriate public education, and to make sure that everyone knows how it's supposed to be used and what it's for, then the IEP document has to reflect the determination in as clear a fashion as possible. So they describe the role of assistive technology in the student's educational program. So how do we ensure quality? In Quiet, we do it with the quality indicators. There are only 5 in this area. Almost all the rest of them have 6 or 7. They are guidelines for documenting AT in the IEP. Every school or district or state should have guidelines on how assistive technology should be listed in the IEP and where. We'll talk more about that later. It also includes services that support the selection, acquisition, and use of AT devices, and the understanding that assistive technology is a tool to support achievement of goals, that assistive technology contributes to measurable and observable outcomes related to progress toward goals, and that the description of the devices and services to be provided and used has to be clear enough that people who are implementing the IEP know when and why the AT is to be used. So there's some big ideas that I'd like to talk with you about including AT in the IEP. The big ideas are AT, it's more than you think, when to document AT in the IEP, where and how to document AT in the IEP, connecting AT to the student's goals, and documenting AT services for others. So with the first one, AT, it's more than you think. AT is not about what something is or where it comes from, but rather about the extent to which it is needed and how it is used by a student as a part of their free, appropriate public education. The legal definition is any item that increases, improves, or maintains the functional capabilities of a student with disabilities. Note that doesn't say any item from a particular place, it says any item. Any item that the student needs to make progress on IEP goals and in the general curriculum, any item that is needed for participation in curricular and extracurricular activities, and it also includes general technology that's used by everyone and is readily available in the customary environments, but is required by this student to address goals, to do the functional things they need to do to be a participative, active, improving student. When to document assistive technology is another thing that's sort of interesting, because the when is when AT devices are needed to provide a student with a free, appropriate public education. When AT devices are required as a part of a student's special education, related services, or supplementary aids and services. Please note that doesn't say how assistive technology services are delivered. It says AT devices are required as a part of special education, related services, or supplementary aids and services. In other words, if AT is needed to address the goals that are the part of the Individualized Education Program, then it's part of their special education. If an AT device, perhaps an AUG-COM device, is needed for a student to participate in and benefit from the related service of speech language, then it needs to be included as a part of their speech language services. And if it's needed to maintain a student in the least restrictive environment and becomes a supplementary aid and service, it's part of that as well. So the AT is a part of something bigger. We also document AT services that are needed to assist a student with the selection, acquisition, and use of an assistive technology device. And then again, that other piece that people often don't understand, when technology is available to everyone as a choice, but is required by the student to do what they need to do, where and when they need to do it. So where and how do you document AT in the IEP? And the interesting piece is, while IDEA requires that you do document it somewhere, at least in consideration, right, in the special factors, but it doesn't specify any location for assistive technology documentation when it is needed. AT can be documented in virtually every section of the IEP if it's relevant to that particular section. Generally, it's best practices to write features needed in the IEP rather than to write device names. For example, you might say a tablet computer with word prediction software, but you wouldn't say a particular program or a particular device. You will notice, however, that there's an asterisk by that, and that is that when we talk about present levels of performance and achievement, then we really do want to name what the student is actually using and how the use of what assistive technology they're using contributes to their present levels of performance. And part of the reason for that is we may need to change something or we may not. But if we know what a student is using, particularly if they've become a proficient user of a particular thing, we would really want to stay with that if we could, rather than go to something else, even if that something else had the same features. I think those of us who use Macs know that when we're sitting in front of a Windows machine, even though it does the same things, it does them in a somewhat different way. And it's certainly, we pay much more attention to the technology than what we're trying to do with the technology. Same thing if you're a Windows user and you have to do something on a Mac, you have to pay a lot of attention to that technology. So that's sort of the notion behind why you would include a device name and software name in that particular place, but not generally. So why are guidelines important? I think it's back to what we said a little bit earlier. Guidelines are important so that IEP teams know in this particular agency or organization or state, where do we typically put assistive technology and how do we typically say it or write it in. Continuity across the agency helps implementers know where to look for the assistive technology, and it also helps if someone's monitoring what you're doing, they can look in a particular place and don't have to go all over the IEP to try to find where and how assistive technology is used. But the other thing that's really important here is that you may find it in multiple places. It may be, obviously it's going to be in the special factors, but it may also be in several other places. One of those places that I mentioned was the present levels. Another one is when you're thinking about a student's needs for the statewide assessments or the large scale assessments that they take. So in those places, as well as in the other places we'll highlight, be thinking about how you can document in those places as well. So one of the places that there has to be a strong connection is between the assistive technology and the achievement of goals, as we mentioned. So how would you talk about assistive technology there? And there are a couple of ways to look at that. One is that assistive technology devices can be written directly into a goal. And here's an example. James will use an electronic word processor with speech output and word prediction to increase the complexity of written products in English class. So his goal is to increase the complexity of written products in English class. But in this particular case, the how is written into the goal. He's going to use his electronic word processor with speech output and word prediction. Note that those are features. Those are not the names of any particular thing. That's what he needs in order to increase the complexity of written products in English class. Now, another way you could do this is you could make a statement about AT that could be written in as an accommodation to be used for multiple goals. So the goals wouldn't have the means in them, but they would be in a statement that connected to those goals. For example, James will use an electronic word processor with speech output and word prediction for any writing task more than one paragraph in length across the curriculum in any class. So you've got a lot more potential places where James really needs to use that electronic word processor with speech output and word prediction than in that one English class. But either way is a good way to do it. There may even be another way that you choose. I personally like the statement that addresses more, but I have a colleague who's an attorney, and she says, I like it written in that statement because it says exactly when it's supposed to be used. I just think, for me, I prefer not to write it in every single goal. But again, that's an opinion, not something that you should take as pro or con. And then what about documenting assistive technology services for others? Assistive technologies services are documented when they're needed by professionals and family members so that they can support the student. There's also typically we write such services in to include training and ongoing support when needed. So the training may be one session and it might be fine, but the more complex the technology is, the more sessions there might be needed for them to be able to help the student, to know how to include a student using that technology in what we're doing in the classroom and how to support them at home so that they're able to make additional progress. Sometimes ongoing support is needed, and when it is, we write not only when it's going to happen, but who's going to provide it. There may also be other program modifications that will lower barriers to student progress but are not directly provided to the student, that are about building the environment into a place where not only this student, but all students can learn and grow. So what about next steps? Here are some that I think are important. Check to see if your district or state has guidelines for including AT in the IEP. If not, volunteer to help create some. It's going to be good for you, and it's going to be good for everyone else as well. Where AT appears in the IEP is not as important as being sure that it's included in a way that makes sense to those who are implementing the IEP and supporting the students' use of AT. They need to know what it's for. They need to know when it needs to be there. Somebody needs to know how to care for it. Often the student can do that independently. Sometimes they need help. And then another step is to use the sample materials and resources that are provided in this module and in other places to learn more about AT in the IEP. Check the internet for other examples. There are many ways to do it well. So what about those resources? There are some that are included in this module that come directly from Quiet, and there are also some that are from other places that you should have a look at. The Quiet resources for this area are quality indicators for including AT in the IEP, the Quiet self-evaluation matrix for including AT in the IEP, planning document for including AT in the IEP, and guiding document for including AT in the IEP. You will find all of those at the website, quiet.org. If you just go to the indicators tab, you'll see them right there. Other resources for AT in the IEP that you might want to have a look at, there's one from Pennsylvania from the Patan Group, Assistive Technology in the IEP, a guide for IEP teams. Ocali in Ohio has another one, Writing Assistive Technology in the IEP. Able Tech in Oklahoma has one called Documenting AT in the IEP. The AIM Center at CAST has both a white paper and a video, a webinar that's recorded on accessible educational materials and technologies in the IEP. You'll find that those fit together quite well. And there are many more. As I said earlier, go to the internet, just Google it and see what's there. So other ways to learn more about Quiet is to go to the Quiet website, which I mentioned, quiat.org. Get a Quiet book. We have a book called Quality Indicators for Assistive Technology, a comprehensive guide to assistive technology services, which was published by CAST Professional Publishing in 2015. It's a fabulous, fabulous resource. And you can also contact the Quiet Leadership team at quietleadership@gmail.com. I have been happy to share this with you. I hope when you go to the Quiet website, you'll also consider joining the Quiet list. There you will find 5,000 friends around the world who are delighted to get into a discussion about any assistive technology question and have lots of opinions, lots of things to help you think about, and you can also share your opinions. I hope this will be helpful to you. I hope that the information in this module will be helpful to you, and it was a pleasure to talk with you.